The Buffalo Bills have a top 5 offensive line in the NFL, and every player is coming back. It's time to get excited.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of the Herd Mentality Substack, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, co-host of the NFL First Read Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, folks, welcome in. We're talking offensive line today on this podcast, just like we have for the quarterbacks, the running backs, the wide receivers, the tight ends. We are going to focus this entire discussion on the Buffalo Bills offensive line, and we're going to attack it through 3 different lenses: reasons to be curious, reasons to be concerned, but we start with reasons to be excited. So I want to tell you why I'm excited about the Buffalo Bills offensive line in 2025. And the number one thing, and I've said this a few times now for these offensive positions, is the continuity. The Buffalo Bills' top 9 offensive linemen from last year are all back. Not just the starting 5, but the 4 primary backups all back in the mix for this coming season. And again, continuity just for continuity isn't necessarily a good thing. But you're talking about the top 9 offensive linemen from one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. I host 2 other podcasts in addition to this one. Locked On NFL Scouting. It's a daily podcast with Kyle Krabs where we talk team building across the league. The other podcast that I host is called NFL First Read. It's a film and analytics podcast that's twice per week. And Brett Whitefield, who's my co-host on that podcast, we recently did an episode where we ranked the offensive lines in the NFL. I had the Bills at number 4. Brett Whitefield had them in the top 5 as well. So you're talking about your 5 starters, your 4 primary backups from what is, to me, obviously a top 5 unit in the league, no worse than top 10. This is one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. And not only is it a top performing offensive line, but it's very unique. The way the Bills run the football, often using 6 offensive linemen, multiple tight ends, sometimes multiple backs, using the tackles the way that they do to pull, really do a lot of longer pulls with Spencer Brown and Deion Dawkins, combined with a pass protection scheme that doesn't give the offensive line a ton of help. A lot of 5-man protections. Not a lot of running backs staying in to help in pass pro. Under 10% of the time, running backs stay in and help in pass protection. Spencer Brown and Deion Dawkins are not getting a lot of help on the edges with these marquee pass rushers. They go man versus man. And Josh Allen was the least sacked quarterback in the NFL last year. Now, some of that is Josh Allen and his ability to deal with pressure. But the Bills ask a lot of this offensive line. It's unique, and it takes care of business, whether it's running the ball or passing the ball. Bills offense is really good every year, and especially over the last few years, a lot of that can be credited to this offensive line, and there is incredible continuity. So that's number 1. Number 2, in terms of things I'm excited about for this offensive line in 2025, it's the depth and this developmental pipeline that exists. I really like what's beyond the starting 5. Of course, Dawkins, Edwards, McGovern, Torrence, Brown, your starters. But you look at the other 4 returning players from last year, and there's a lot to like. Alec Anderson took off last year as the 6th offensive lineman, really made a lot of noise in that spot. And that was a position, if you remember, the year before was held by David Edwards, who then became the Bills' starting left guard. And Anderson played over 300 snaps last year. And those are meaningful reps for him, as he may have a bigger role in the future. But he's proven himself in terms of a versatile player that can play that big tight end role, but can also fill in at any of the interior 3 spots and probably even play some tackle if necessary. You got Tylan Grable, who's the guy that I'm just really excited about. I didn't think much of him coming out of Central Florida, but what he showed us in training camp, what he showed us in preseason was terrific. He was the primary backup to Deion Dawkins and Spencer Brown last year. First off the bench for tackle. And I think he earned it. And I'm very excited about where his career is going to go. And I keep saying this, but I'm not sleeping on him as a future starter for this team, potentially at left guard in 2026. He was really good in the preseason. How about Ryan Vandemark? He's entering his 4th season with the Bills. 3 years already with Aaron Kromer. Has been the Bills' swing tackle. Got a chance to start that regular season game last year against Kansas City. I thought he was functional. All the athleticism and size you could want. And then there's Cedric Van Pran Granger, who's a player the Bills got in the 5th round. I graded him as a day 2 player that I looked at as a starter. Highly experienced player coming out of Georgia. Very successful offense, very successful offensive line. He was a team captain, a multi-year team captain. Loved his tape in college. That's an exciting mix of young players that are in their 2nd and 4th seasons with the team that you feel good about. Not that they've played a ton. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but there's a lot of intrigue with that group for me. And I certainly have more intrigue rooted in some players versus others, but there is something about each one of them that has me very excited for what they can mean to this team in a depth role, and maybe even as some of these guys as future starters. The last thing I want to get into and under why I'm excited for this Bills offensive line in 2025 is the coaching. Aaron Kromer. Dude's unbelievable. As proven as they come as an offensive line coach in the NFL. You think about the great offensive line coaches in the league. It's Aaron Kromer. It's Jeff Stoutland with the Eagles. It's Bill Callahan with Tennessee. And that's the group right now. Those are the marquee guys. And the Bills have one of them. And Aaron Kromer's resume is off the charts. He's been coaching offensive line in the NFL for a long time. You felt his impact in Buffalo. But throughout his career, whether it was with the Raiders in the early 2000s, that Super Bowl team, getting a chance to work with John Gruden and Bill Callahan. He was the O-line coach for the Saints at the peak of their run with Sean Payton, including that Super Bowl win in 2009. Then he's the offensive coordinator for the Bears for 2 seasons. His first year as OC of the Bears were number 2 in scoring offense. When has the Bears offense ever been good? Like literally ever. Number 2 scoring offense in the league year 1 under Aaron Kromer as the OC. And he actually comes to Buffalo. 2 years in Buffalo in 2015 and 2016. The Bills had the number 1 rushing offense in the league both years. Then he goes to the Rams. Is there for Sean McVay's first 4 seasons. A lot of success there, obviously. And then when we know what he's done now over the last 3 years, entering his 4th year back in Buffalo. The guy's resume is off the charts. The different players that he's been able to develop and guys that didn't even have a lot of pedigree, unlocking so much out of these players. You've seen it in Buffalo. You've seen what happened with Spencer Brown. You've seen Deion Dawkins play the best football of his career. It's exciting. And this guy's back, and he's had his hands on these players now for multiple years. Top 9 are back from last year. Couple of new additions this year. So whether it's the continuity, top to bottom, the developing depth, the outstanding starters, or the coaching, there's a lot to be excited about regarding this Bills offensive line in 2025. All right, coming up next, we're going to flip this conversation upside down and talk about the variables that I'm concerned about regarding this Buffalo Bills offensive line. So, folks, be sure to stick with me. You ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning for a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. When I first started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and I save more. And folks, it can be pretty surprising to see how much certain spending habits can add up, and Monarch makes it easy to identify them. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. All right, folks, welcome back. Let's get into the items that I'm concerned about regarding this Buffalo Bills offensive line. And number one is the future of the middle three. Connor McGovern at center, David Edwards at left guard, O'Cyrus Torrence at right guard. McGovern and Edwards are entering the last year of their contracts. And I think both players have positioned themselves well to get a nice new deal. Will it be from the Bills? Will it be from someone else? That remains to be seen, but the Bills have some choices to make here. You kind of layer that together with James Cook, and you start to wonder who's going to be around. So we can celebrate this continuity for now, but this could have a bit of a different look in 2026. I think Connor McGovern is building a resume that's going to pay him 13, 14, 15 million a season. That would be my expectation. And he said on the Cover One film room that there were some talks early in the offseason about an extension, and those have been tabled, and not sure where that's at. And Connor McGovern, in that same interview, made it clear that when he came to Buffalo from Dallas, he didn't take the biggest contract he was offered. He went to the best opportunity in Buffalo. And, you know, he said he'd love to stay in Buffalo, but sometimes business gets in the way of things. We'll see where it goes. David Edwards, I don't think he'll be nearly as expensive as Connor McGovern, but I think he'll be a $6, $7, $8 million a year starter. Does that make sense for the Bills? Do you look at this pipeline that I keep celebrating and feel like there needs to be an answer, a succession plan in place to find a low-cost starter to succeed David Edwards? That's a real possibility. And O'Cyrus Torrence is signed through 2026, so there's nothing to be super concerned about there, but he does become extension eligible after this season. And I think O'Cyrus Torrence is on a great path. And if he takes another step this year, you know, he'll be a guard that's staring at a contract that's north of $15 million a year. You're seeing some guards over $20 million a season, guys like Robert Hunt. So everything looks really good, and these are great problems to have. But if we're being honest, this is probably the last year of that middle three being intact. So what does it look like? Who succeeds who? Who do they keep? Can they keep them all? That feels unlikely, especially when you add in the James Cook conversation. You know, when you look at the 2027 season, between James Cook, Connor McGovern, David Edwards, and O'Cyrus Torrence, how many of them are still on the team? We'll see if the Bills can effectively do some draft and develop and see if some of these young guys that we're talking about, whether that's a Cedric Van Pran Granger or a Tylan Grable, can step into some of these roles. We'll see. Number two, in terms of items I'm concerned about for this offensive line, is staying healthy. The Bills have been unbelievably healthy over the last two seasons with the offensive line. Only one game was missed due to injury for the Bills' starting offensive line over the last 2 seasons, and it was Spencer Brown this past year. Ryan Vandemark started that Chiefs game. That's it. The preferred starters have started every game over the last 2 seasons. Law of averages tells you that that's probably not going to continue. So I hope the law of averages is wrong, but I think it would be pretty unlikely for the Bills to go 3 years in a row of essentially perfect health for the offensive line. Which leads me into number 3, which is a lack of experience with the depth. I've raved about this pipeline so many times on this podcast, and I really like it. But the reality is these guys don't have a lot of game experience. My appreciation for this developing depth is rooted in what I've seen at training camp, what I've seen in preseason, and of course, that Aaron Kromer is coaching it. But outside of that Week 18 game last year where the Bills had nothing to play for against New England, where these guys got a chance to start a game, the only other start was Ryan Vandemark against the Chiefs over the last 2 years. Or for any of these players, Alec Anderson, Ryan Vandemark, Cedric Van Pran-Granger, Tylan Grable, there's been one game where they started and it wasn't that Week 18 game where the Bills rested all their starters. Something to think about. In terms of career snaps played, Tylan Grable, 79, Cedric Van Pran-Granger, 125, Ryan Vandemark, 245, Alec Anderson, 335. That's it. That's it. You don't even have 1,000 snaps from your top 4 backups. Now, it's been helpful that the Bills have been well ahead in some games, and they get a chance to get some run in the fourth quarter. That Week 18 game was really helpful for those guys to get some run. But there's not a lot of experience, to be completely candid with you, when it comes to the Bills' primary backups. There's a lot to like, but they haven't actually proven that much in games. So that's kind of the consequence of, hey, your offensive linemen are always healthy. Well, now you've got backups who haven't really had much experience and haven't been tested. I like them, though. I like them a lot. Hopefully we don't have to see them. But whether it's the law of averages or just that you don't have a ton of experience with likable depth, there's some things to be concerned about in addition to the future of the middle 3. So that's what I'm concerned about. Coming up next, I want to get into what I'm curious about regarding the Bills' offensive line in 2025. So folks, be sure to stick with me. All right, folks, welcome back. We're going to close out this conversation today about the Bills' offensive line with 3 things that I'm curious about. Number 1 is, how long can we expect high level of play from Dion Dawkins? I think he's getting better and better. Turned 31 in April. I think his last 3 years have been his best 3 years. He's made 4 consecutive Pro Bowls. Signed through 2027. Again, I'm not fearing regression, but Father Time is undefeated, and at some point, there will be some regression with Dion Dawkins. Now, I'm encouraged by some other offensive linemen and how late they have played into their career. You think about a guy like Trent Williams with the 49ers. He's 37 years old, still playing at a high level. Andrew Whitworth retired after his age 40 season with the Rams. Jason Peters played until he was 41. Now his last Pro Bowl was his age 34 season. Still had a number of years as a starter between age 34 and 41. Tyron Smith just retired. He turned 34 in December. I feel decent that he'll kind of be the same player that he's been through age 33, 34, but what does that look like 35, 36, 37? Hopefully he can stay healthy. I think, you look at Tyron Smith and him turning 34 in December and retiring, that's a guy that had a ton of injury issues. Deion Dawkins really hasn't had those. So hopefully he could stay healthy. And I mean, hopefully we get another 6, 7, 8 years out of Deion Dawkins. But when I think about what I'm curious about, it's how much longer can we enjoy elite level play from Deion Dawkins? Hopefully a long time. Number two, I think this is one of the most compelling camp battles that will exist. It's Ryan Vandemark versus Chase Lunt for a roster spot. I think the Bills will keep 9 offensive linemen, and I think the 9th spot is probably between Vandemark and Lunt. And there's some really interesting dynamics for both of these players. Ryan Vandemark is scheduled to be a restricted free agent after the season. This also applies to Alec Anderson. If the Bills were to tender Ryan Vandemark, it would be $3.5 million for the 2026 season. And that would be the right of first refusal tender. I don't think the Bills will put a first or a second round tender. It's too expensive. That wouldn't make a lot of sense. Short of Ryan Vandemark having to play extended action and really showcase himself as an impact starter, the right of first refusal tender would be $3.5 million for 2026. Well, you're not going to pay Ryan Vandemark that for 2026. That just doesn't make sense. It's very similar to the Quentin Morris situation where you like Quentin Morris. He's a good player. He's been a good depth player, but you're not going to pay him $3.5 million. And so the Bills declined to tender him. He becomes an unrestricted free agent. And you saw him. He signed for like 1 year, $1.2 million with the Jaguars. So if we don't learn much more about Ryan Vandemark this year, you're not going to pay him that $3.5 million. He'll become an unrestricted free agent, and maybe he'll want to stay in Buffalo, maybe. But he probably looks at Spencer Brown and Deion Dawkins and thinks, I'm not going to start here. And so just like Quentin Morris was looking for probably some more opportunity, probably found it with Jacksonville, you could see a similar deal. So I don't think they're going to do the RFA tender, and I don't think they'll do it on Alec Anderson either. So what type of market did those guys have? Be fascinating to find out. So back to the Ryan Vandemark versus Chase Lunt situation. That's what you're looking at with Ryan Vandemark. With Chase Lunt, he's a 7th-round pick that signed a 4-year, $4.4 million deal. Now, obviously, you're going to keep the better player, right? Whichever one's better is the one that you should keep for 2025. But this has to creep into the decision-making. If you cut Chase Lunt, you expose him to waivers. He could sign with some other team. Could be a Alex Austin situation. It could be a Luke Tenuta situation, or a Jack Anderson, or a, who's the other one? Nick Broker. All these different guys that the Bills, offensive linemen the Bills drafted late, didn't make the team. They got plucked by some other team. They didn't really become anything. But Alex Austin looks like he might be a decent player for the Patriots. You might not want to expose Chase Lunt to waivers, in which case you want to maintain that 4-year, $4.4 million deal. So it's a really important camp for both players. And I am not sleeping on Ryan Vandemark in it being his 4th year with Aaron Kromer. He's been the Bills' swing tackle. You have probably a decent level of comfort with him versus Chase Lunt, who's a rookie, a late-round pick that, from a measurables perspective, would be an outlier if he was successful. So there's a lot to sort out there. It's a very fascinating situation, but I think those guys are competing for one spot. And the contract piece is definitely a layer to it. The last thing that I'm curious about for the Bills' offensive line in 2025 is offensive linemen 11 and beyond. So we talk about this top 9. We'll call Chase Lunt number 10. And then there's still more guys that are interesting to me. The Bills signed Kendrick Green, who's a veteran, who's a 2021 3rd-round pick of the Steelers, has started 19 games in the NFL. He's won 2 different starting jobs. Now, he hasn't been able to keep them, but he's won 2 different starting jobs in 4 seasons. 26 years old, big-time athlete. He would immediately be the Bills' most experienced depth player if he were to make the team. I don't think he's going to, barring an injury. But that's a heck of a case. I talked about how it's a fair concern to point out that you don't have much experience with your depth. Well, here's a 19-game starter. This guy has a lot more experience by himself than all of the other Bills depth players along the offensive line combined. Can he make some noise? How about Mike Edwards? Second-year player out of Campbell, 6'6", 363 pounds. He's massive. A pretty good athlete for his size. What does he showcase this year? How about Richard Garage entering his third season? Has had a couple of good preseasons with the team. Not a dynamic physical profile, but a guy that I think has played well in preseason. Still around. Does he want to come back for a third year on the Bills practice squad? Can he make some noise? And then there's Travis Clayton, Bills' 7th-round pick from 2024. Rugby player from England. Freak athlete, missed his rookie season. What is this guy going to be? Is he the next Christian Wade? Or is he the next Jordan Mailata? Or is he somewhere in between? He's exempt this year from the roster. The Bills can keep him around on the International Pathway Program. You get the extra practice squad spot. And maybe that's what they'll do with Travis Clayton. I don't know what it takes to become a functional football player when you've never done it in your entire life. But from a size and athleticism perspective, he certainly got the stuff. So in terms of things I'm curious about, it's this group beyond the group, right? You're starting 5. You got that next 4, which is the Anderson, Van Brand Granger, Grable, Van de Mark Bucket. Then there's the Chase Lunt, number 10. You kind of see, foil him against Van de Mark. And then it's Green, Edwards, Garage, and Clayton. And you're like, wow, there's 14 guys that are interesting here. Which is good. This is good, right? You want that. You want that for sure. But what type of noise can they make? We'll have an opportunity. Everything in Buffalo is earned. We'll see what they can do. So a lot to be excited about, a lot to be curious about, some things to be concerned about as well regarding the Bills' offensive line in 2025. Hope you enjoyed this conversation. I hope that you come back. We got some great content the rest of the week, including a couple of guests, Herd Mentality. Bill Squad will be back on Thursday at noon Eastern time. So much to keep track of here, even if it is the first week of July and nothing's happening in the NFL. We're still talking Buffalo Bills football here for you every single day. So don't miss anything. Make sure that you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills. And I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.